Don't clap yet. You don't know what I'm going to say. I'll try to keep the Spinal Tap jokes to a minimum, guys. Okay, so the title for today's lecture is Equality and Respect. So I want to start off by asking you a few judgment questions. Now, you don't know me very well. Some of you I haven't even met at all. Though others of you I've only known for a day or so. But just guess, do you think that I'm as wealthy as Bill Gates? Just guess. Not a trick question. No? All right. Yeah, unfortunately, you're correct. Do you think that I'm as tough as Vin Diesel? I appreciate the flattery, but a more accurate, honest judgment. Think I could take him? No, oh, probably not. Do you think I'm as clever as Frank? Perhaps not. He knows a lot more about economics than I do. Am I as attractive as Orlando Bloom? Be honest? No. Okay. So, now here's the thing. I was just reading this again. Well, I do this all the time. I'm a nut. It says here that all men are created equal, but I'm not as hot as Orlando Bloom. So where's my equality? What's the deal? If I'm supposed to be equal, if we're all supposed to be equal, then I should be as hot as Orlando Bloom. I should be as wealthy as Bill Gates. I should be as tough as Vin Diesel. But, so I've missed something here. But I'm sure I read that right. All right, well, if you remember one of the themes from yesterday's talk, it's that sometimes words mean different things, and it's part of the philosopher's job to sort of parse out different kinds of meanings. So one of the things that we have to talk about is, okay, say we're all equal, what do you mean by that? All right, let me ask you a different kind of question. Does anyone think that the white race is superior to all other races? Any takers? No, you used to get a lot of yeses for that, but you don't really get that much anymore. All right, let me ask you a different question. Anyone think that males are intrinsically superior to females? You do, okay. Just a little? Okay, good to know. But, all right, but probably most of you don't say yes to that one. All right, so sounds like you think that there are some areas of equality, because when I asked if one race was better than another, you said no. I asked if one sex was better than another, you said no. But a minute ago, you all recognized some manifest inequalities in terms of my wealth, my toughness, my hotness, and so on. So we're equal in some respects then, but we're unequal in other respects. Okay, so what is it that Jefferson seems to be implying in here? It's plainly not anything like being wealthy or being tough. And it's certainly not things like height, right? I'm certainly not as tall as Frank. And it's just a natural fact that people come in different heights. So we're definitely not equal in those kinds of senses either. Okay, so must be something else. It's probably moral equality, equality of moral worth. That's what the equal reference in the Declaration of Independence seems to be referring to, that we're all of equal moral worth. Now, last time I was talking about rights being some sort of natural thing. That is, the Lockean idea is that we have certain rights by nature. And anything like that would have to be universal to all people. We'd all have to have them. If it's part of human nature, or part of what it means to be a person, then it would be true for everybody. So that means that it would be equal. So one way to think about a theory of rights is a manifestation of our recognition of the equality of moral worth of each person. So we could start making our arrows this way. Moral equality gives us a good reason to talk about rights. In other words, if we're all equal, then that would mean that we all have certain rights that are the same as everybody else's rights. But in practical terms, the arrow goes the other way around. Rights are what give reality to that equality. So I'll just make another arrow like that. In other words, if we think about what a system of rights does for us, it gives us things like equality before the law. For example, if Smith goes into court, Smith has all of the same criminal protections and rules of the way that the law is applied and evidence and all that as Jones would if Jones were brought into court. Smith and Jones get treated the same by the legal system. When that's true, then that's an example of having equal protection of the laws. We have that expression in the Constitution also, equal protection of the laws. That's what makes us really be equal. So you really have these arrows going in both directions. On the one hand, our sense of equal moral worth is what might underlie a theory of rights or a conception of rights, but at the same time, it's having a system of rights which makes it real for us to be equal. Because, let's say we didn't have equal protection of the laws, then what would my equality amount to, right? In other words, if you said, well, look, all persons who are 5'6" or under don't have the right to face their accuser at trial or some such. So I get brought into court, and they just make stuff up, and I don't get to cross-examine any witnesses. I said, well, wait a minute, that's not fair. You're railroading me here. Well, too bad for you. You're not taller than 5'6", so you don't get these rights. Well, you see that that seriously undermines any claim we might have to my being equal in status to you. I can't defend myself in the legal system the same way that Frank can. So that's not equal. We're not equal in terms of our ability to protect our liberties. Okay? So I really do mean these arrows to go both ways. A conception of moral equality might theoretically underwrite a conception of rights, but at the same time, rights are what give teeth, if you will, to any real meaning of our equality. So equal equality before the law, equal protection of the rights that we have. We saw yesterday that within the Lockean framework at least, the point of having government at all is to give us some way to protect rights that we already have, pre-political rights, rights that we have by nature. Okay? So we've got the rights, and then we make up government institutions in order to be efficient about protecting those rights. Well, it also turned out that the basis of your consent, the basis of your obligations to those authorities was your consent. You want to be part of something that makes it easier for you to protect yourself. If it's making it harder for me to protect myself, what's my angle here? What's my advantage in signing on to a legal system that makes it harder for me to protect myself? That's just foolishness. Okay? So because the point of government in the first place is to protect our rights, to make it easier for us to protect ourselves, then that's going to have to be equal protection of rights. That is, our rights are going to have to be held equally within the political system, that no one person gets some bonus treatment that others don't get, that one person doesn't get special privileges, or one group doesn't get special privileges that entail the disadvantage of another. That otherwise we wouldn't be equal at all. Okay? Now that means, notice we can have a system where everybody's equal before the law and everybody's rights get equal protection, and yet it's still true that some are wealthier than others, or some are tougher than others, or some are hotter than others. That means that it's a component both of Lockean liberalism generally and the Jeffersonian concept particularly, that there's a difference between equality of opportunity to do stuff and equality of the results of your attempts to do so. I made a distinction yesterday between having a right to pursue happiness and having a right to everything that your happiness might entail, right? Remember, if I have a right to everything that my happiness might entail, that gets us in a lot of danger, because if I'm Hannibal Lecter, that means I now have a right to eat my neighbors for supper. We don't want that to be the case. So my right to pursue happiness has to be understood in terms of boundary conditions set by the equal rights of other people to also pursue happiness. So if my pursuit of happiness means killing you, then that can't be something that I'm entitled to do. On the other hand, my pursuit of happiness might entail all sorts of things that are different from yours, but as long as they don't interfere with your ability to pursue happiness also, then it's not clear why I shouldn't be able to do that. So one way we might cash that out in terms of a bullet point is this. Respect for persons just means respect for their rights. If you're not respecting the person's rights, that means that you're not respecting that person as an autonomous, separate, equally worthwhile person. What does it mean to respect another person? Anybody here a fan of 50 Cent? Yeah, I'm not myself. Anybody a fan of Bruce Lee movies? Yeah, works for me. Okay, but a number of you didn't raise your hands there. Okay, so some of you like 50 Cent, which I don't, and some of us like Bruce Lee movies, and some of you don't. Okay, so we don't all agree about stuff that we like. Okay, some of you, anyone in here majoring in history? Okay, so I guess you think history's good, but a lot of people aren't majoring in history. Anybody here majoring in economics? Okay, so you guys think economics is good, but a number of you have chosen some other thing to do. All right, so everybody seems to have different tastes and pursuits. Let's say well, I give you $10, and I give you $10, and I give you $10. What are you going to spend your $10 on? CD? Okay, what are you going to spend your $10 on? Candy? What are you going to spend your $10 on? Gas. Gas for your car. $10 isn't going to get you very far. What are you going to spend your $10 on? Books. What kind of books? Frank Miller's graphic novels? Or economic texts? Or
Victorian literature.
Victorian literature? Okay. What books would you buy if I gave you $10 for the bookstore? Economics texts. What books would you spend if I gave you $10 for the bookstore, what would you buy? Music. Okay. Same music as you'd buy? No. Did you already discuss this, or is this just lucky for me?
I don't buy music.
Oh, you said you'd buy music. Right. So what would you be buying? Rock? R&B? How does he do it, folks? Now look, it didn't take enormous psychic abilities on my part to randomly guess that in a crowd like this, that a lot of people would have a lot of different tastes and pursuits. Obviously, you also have some interests in common, otherwise you wouldn't be here at the seminar. Okay? So I can predict that you have certain interests in common based on your being here. But I can also very confidently predict that you have lots of different things that you like and are interested in doing. And that if I gave you some extra cash to spend, you'd spend it in different ways. Even if I sent you to the same store, you'd be spending it in different ways. Okay? Now, others of you don't like the things that others of you said you liked. Now, do you hate her now because she listens to different music? Okay. Do you guys hate each other because you're buying different books? No. Okay. You see where I'm going with this? I don't have to like everything that you like in order to respect you. I don't have to like everything you do or say or think or care about in order to have respect for you as a person. What I do have to have is a recognition of your right to do or say or think or like those things. Provided that, what? Say it again? Or anybody else's, exactly. What she said was that it doesn't infringe upon my rights, and I just appended to that, or anybody else's. I don't have to have respect for your desire to kill and eat your neighbors. I don't have any particular reason why I should respect that desire, because that's an interest, a hobby, if you will, that entails the violation of other people's rights to live and to be free. So if you say, well, you know, here's what I like to do. I like to spend my extra money on extra sharp carving knives so I can eat my neighbors for supper. I don't have to like that taste. I don't have to respect it either. And in fact, I can produce arguments as to why that's a bad thing to do and why I think you shouldn't do it and so on. But before we even get that far, I can stop at saying, hey, I don't like that and I don't respect it. But as far as all the other things that I asked you about, this kind of book versus that kind of book, or books versus music, or this kind of music versus that kind of music, or music versus shoes or candy or what have you, I don't have to like all those things in order to respect your rights to pursue those things, because your pursuit of those things doesn't entail the violation of anybody else's rights. Okay? So, again, I don't have to like everything that you do or say or think or pursue, as long as I recognize your right to do or say or think or pursue those things, subject to the boundary condition that these pursuits are consistent with a similar respect for everybody else. Okay? A sort of quick soundbite way to put that would be that your lack of respect for other people would be the reason why you're violating their rights. And we need not respect other people's lack of respect. Because you don't, right, a natural right to live and be free means that you're entitled to your own self. So other people's wishes to violate yourself are not wishes that need to be taken seriously. Okay? So your ability to recognize, right, everybody's free to do whatever they want, has that boundary condition tacked onto it, as long as they're not violating anybody else's rights by doing so. Or, another way to put that is, as long as their pursuits of these things are consistent with an equal respect for everybody else's wishes to do similarly. And there's that word again. Compossible, right? Our conception of equal respect is going to be subject to what I yesterday called the compossibility criterion, that it's going to be mutually non-conflicting. Your tastes and pursuits have to be compossible. That is, your right to pursue X can't logically entail a conflict with the other person's pursuit of something Y. I don't mean, of course, that there's no such thing as scarce resources. If I just sort of throw a $10 bill up in the air and it's going to sort of flutter down, you can't all have it. Only the person that it flutters nearest will be able to have that particular $10 bill. But the reason that that's not a rights conflict is because neither of you was entitled to it in the first place. Right? I'm just doing an experiment here by throwing a $10 bill up in the air to see where it lands. So it's actually my $10 bill, and I'm the only one who's entitled to it. But I might give it to you as part of the experiment. But then who I'm giving it to is, TBA. So there's a scarcity there. You can't both have it. But the one of you getting it doesn't violate the rights of the other person not getting it, because neither of you had a right to it in the first place. What would be an example of a conflict would be if you suddenly developed a covetous fixation on the wallet of the person sitting next to you and said, well, I didn't get the $10 from the floating dollar experiment, so I'm just going to sneak into the wallet of the person sitting next to me and take one of those $10 bills, because after all, I'm entitled to $10 too. Okay, so the flaw in the reasoning there is that you're not entitled to the $10 in your neighbor's wallet. I see everybody sort of shifting in their seats and fiddling with their hips there. Okay, so equal rights must be compossible rights. No system of equal rights could even logically exist if they weren't compossible. Do you see that that's a simple matter of logical necessity? We couldn't have equal rights if Smith's rights entailed violating Jones's rights, because then Jones wouldn't have equal rights to Smith anymore. If they're equal, then they're necessarily compossible. You see that? Okay. Gets better. Wait for it. If equal rights are all compossible, then any natural equal rights will have to be, am I going to write a word here that starts with N or that starts with P? N, right. if any system of equal rights has to be a compossible set of rights, then any natural equal rights would have to be negative rights. You can make up positive rights that have a compossibility criterion. For example, if you're setting up an employment contract, for example, right? Go back to my employment contract. My right to inspect my personnel file in the Human Resources Office doesn't take away any other faculty members' rights to look at their personnel files. So that's a positive right that I've been given by the contract that I signed with my employer. But it's a compossible right because my ability to look at my file doesn't interfere with anybody else's rights to look at their files. But natural equal rights will have to be negative in nature, because if I had a natural entitlement to take away your liberty, then we wouldn't have equal rights. Do you see that? Okay. Before I give you a sort of thought experiment to work with, let me stop at this point to see if you have any questions.
Yeah, good morning. How important is it for natural rights to be included in the Constitution to be written? And should the government only protect the natural rights so that the individuals can pursue their own happiness, or should they also include artificial rights or possible rights? The importance between both and what the role of government is.
Well, I mean, according to the Lockean framework, the purpose of having a government is simply to protect rights that we have by nature already. For example, your right to live and be free, and to pursue projects that don't entail the violation of other people's rights. And Locke's argument, and Rob got into this a little bit, Locke's argument is that we might find it difficult to do that in the state of nature. In other words, if we didn't have any set-up social institutions, we might find it difficult to protect our liberties. Not that we don't have them or that we're not entitled to them, but that we might find it difficult to secure them. So if we could think up some social structures that we could all agree to that would actually facilitate the protection of our rights, then we'd be doing ourselves a favor. And that's the basis for our consenting to it. The basis for our consenting to it is that it's good. It makes us better off than we would have been if we didn't have it. Right? In the state of nature, I'm liable to get whacked over the head with the large mallet because people covet my wallet. But if we set up some rules that say, you're not allowed to violate other people's property rights, if you do, then you have to pay a fine or go to jail or get whacked in the head with the mallet yourself or whatever it is, then that gives other people who might be tempted to violate my rights some good reason not to violate my rights. Oh, yeah.
Talking about paying a fine or something. So if I get in prison, that's taking away my rights. So is there a point where I lose my rights, my natural rights to life and liberty?
Well, you wouldn't lose your natural rights to them, right? But if you've signed on to some social institutions where there's rules that say, if you beat somebody up, then you have to give up X, Y, and Z, right? Obviously, if you're locked up in jail, then you're being deprived of your liberty. Okay, but the reason that assuming that you've been correctly convicted and all, then the reason that you've lost that liberty is the direct result of your choice to violate your own contractual agreement not to be an aggressor. Here's a simple example. When you go to play a sport, sports are always rule-governed games. So I don't know, let's just simple example, baseball, okay? So you hit the ball and you run towards first base, but the fielder catches the ball and gets to first before you do. Are you safe or you out? You're out. So let's say you just stand there anyway, and you say, I'm not going anywhere. I want to be here. I want to be on first. In fact, I'm going to make this a home run. So you keep going to second and to third, and all the other players are standing like, and then you come around to home base, you go, yay, I got a home run, woohoo! So does your team actually score because you've done this? No. Why? Because it's not like you don't have rights to run around bases or something, but by agreeing to play the game of baseball, you're agreeing, all right, baseball's a rule-governed activity and here's the rules and so forth. So you can't just make stuff up and expect to be continuing to play the game, okay? A more violent example would be if you punched the first baseman, get out of my way, buddy, and you knocked him down, right? Baseball's supposed to be not a violent sport, so if you punch out the first baseman in order to get to first, you get kicked out of the game. You might say, that's not fair, I have a right to play baseball. Well, no, not really, right? You only have a right to play baseball within the rules that govern the game of baseball. So if you start hitting the other fielders, you get tossed out of the game. That's sort of like what happens when you rob somebody or beat somebody up, and then they come and arrest you, and you say, hey, but I have a right to liberty. You can't put me in jail. You see the difference? You've agreed to, here's the laws, and I'm not supposed to beat people up. And so it's because you violated rules that you agreed to and beat this other guy up that now you get to go to jail. Yeah?
Is it possible that you could not have any respect for a person, but you still respect the fact that they deserve rights? For example, I don't respect Saddam Hussein as a person at all, but I still think that he deserves the right to a fair trial and the right to live.
Okay, yeah, interesting question. The idea that you respect him in some respects but not others, right? You respect his equality before the law, for example. That's a correct recognition on your part that if equality before the law is to mean anything, then it has to be universal for all people. But at the same time, you're recognizing that he's a despicable person and his tastes and pursuits, tyrannizing other people and so forth, are not worthy of your respect. That's exactly what I was saying. You can recognize that the legal system has to protect everybody's rights, right to a trial, for instance, while at the same time saying, hey, your particular hobbies, being the tyrant and torturing people and stuff, is not a respect-worthy hobby. Why? Because being a tyrant and a torturer and stuff violates the compossibility criterion. These are tastes and pursuits that we can say, I don't have any respect for that. And I don't respect people whose hobbies are, torture and tyranny and so on. Because why? Because those are rights-violating hobbies. Okay? We need to have respect for other people's hobbies only to the extent that those are compossible with equal respect for the rights of others. So if my hobby is being a torturing tyrant guy, then you'd be right to say, I don't like this guy at all. I don't have any respect for this guy at all. But then once I get arrested, you are going to have to say, well, here's the trial procedures, and we're going to follow those trial procedures today just like we did every other day. Because otherwise we wouldn't have a system of equal rights.
You say we have to respect their hobbies.
I'm using hobbies as shorthand for everything you like, your tastes and pursuits, your avocation.
Well, you say, just respect someone's, for example, opinion, as long as that opinion doesn't interfere with someone else's rights. But do you have to respect that opinion or hobby, or can you just respect the right to it without actually respecting it, even if it's not?
No, that's an excellent distinction. I don't have any respect at all for any false opinion, because it's false, right? But I can respect your right to have your opinions, even if I think your opinions are false, right? But if like for example, if you're a member of the Flat Earth Society or something, I don't have any respect for that viewpoint. It's because I think it's nonsense. But I can respect your right to espouse flat Earth theory, unless you're a geography teacher, in which case we might make a case for professional misconduct or something. But you're making an excellent distinction, and it's the same thing with the musical tastes. I don't have to respect the kind of music that you like, and I might think, man, this guy has deformed musical sensibilities if he thinks that's good music. But I can still respect your right to choose whatever kind of music floats your boat. Yeah.
What is the proper role of government and society as far as addressing crime and violations? Like, let's say, is it just to protect society and that's number one, or do we actually have a need system for this possible rights for justice? Let's say you could tweak the alleles of the brain of a criminal and make them not do that anymore. That would be punishment. That would be
Yeah, I'll try to parse out the different aspects of your question. The original purpose of any kind of a legal system is to protect your rights. People might try to aggress against you, and you need to have some mechanism for being secure in your right not to be aggressed against. For example, you've been working in the fields growing your barley, okay, and then someone comes along and whacks you in the head to take your barley, because after all, why should I work to harvest barley when I can just knock you in the head and take your barley? So if we have some sort of a legal framework which says that's not acceptable conduct, then first of all, most people will have an incentive not to do it in the first place. But second of all, anyone who actually does do it, then you can run to the sheriff and say, hey, you know, this guy hit me in the head and took my wheat. And then you have some recourse to get compensated for your suffering, your loss. So on one level, the very existence of a legal framework that forbids theft, for instance, deters people from stealing. Because most people are going to say, oh, well, you know, that's disallowed by the legal system, so if I do that, I'll get in trouble. Most people, you know, respond to incentives and won't do things that get them in trouble. People do nevertheless commit crimes, but then the other thing that a legal system does is it allows you some redress when that does happen. So on the one hand, most of the crime gets deterred by the fact that most people don't want to get in trouble. But then when you do find people committing crimes, you've got some way to get justice. Now, the other question about the nature of the punishment, that's sort of a different question, which I'm going to put off to my fourth talk when I'll get back to these issues. I got one more question about this stuff, and then I'll give you some thought experiment to do. One more question or no? Okay, so here's the thing. Sounds like the American revolutionary document, the Declaration of Independence, is following in this Lockean framework where we have equal liberty to pursue our ends with full recognition that that might result in unequal outcomes, that Smith might end up wealthier than Jones, but that what makes it good is that the equality of opportunity to pursue goods is equal for Smith and Jones. And this shows equal respect for, by showing equal respect for their rights, we are showing equal respect for them as persons. The French, you might have heard, had a slightly different slogan in their revolution, and they wanted to simultaneously champion liberty and equality. So my question for you as you go into your breakout groups is, try to think of, you can pretend you're sort of making your own little constitution here. Try to draft some sort of framework for a government that could be more French than the French, that is more successful at doing what the French wanted to do than the French were. That is, try to construct some sort of a governmental framework which maximally protects both liberty and gives everybody equality. So go see if you can do that and come back in about 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm just having a look at your posters here to see what some of the possible solutions you might have come up with. This group's noted that equality of outcome and opportunity will be difficult, perhaps impossible to balance with liberty, and I think that's probably correct. But let's see what some of the other people's solutions were. This group also said basic minimum level of education, which is federally funded, along with some familiar things like a democratically elected representative government with a constitution and a Bill of Rights. Here, it says that there's some difficulties with equality of outcome because it's hard to judge and people have different abilities. But one possibility would be that families lead to a connection with others, and there's those lovely, lovely words, spontaneous order. All of the IHS staff loves the sound of those two words, and you'll hear a lot more of that later on. But then equality of opportunity, how to establish equal opportunities. Well, of course, equal protection of negative liberty does protect equality of opportunity. But the question is, how do you balance that with equality of outcome? Here, the distinction's been reiterated: equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. This one seems to think that there'd be something unfair about an equalizing of outcome. And then there's some quotes from John Rawls here, a very famous political philosopher, that the maximum amount of opportunity to the minimum basic rights might include access to education, healthcare, political freedoms, and respect. Remember, though, this is not a uniform list, right? This list of goods is like apples and oranges, because respect, for example, is something that everybody can have unlimited quantities of, but education and healthcare are not things that everybody can have unlimited quantities of. We can all respect everybody else without violating anybody's negative liberties. Indeed, respecting everybody else is what is entailed by respecting equal negative liberties. But access to education and healthcare, those would be positive rights, which we've seen might conflict with negative rights. Was it a question?
Oh, it's just a comment, a really fast comment.
Was this your group, or are you just commenting on it?
Our group was the one with the yellow sheet, the one, spontaneous order one. And when you keep the rights simple, and when you just include the natural rights, you won't allow any discrimination. It's when government starts to include artificial rights when there has to be some things given at the expense of others, like Bastiat said. So we're trying to argue the point on how to, it's not possible to attain equal outcome. You can just simply diminish the marginal differences in society by creating equal opportunities. Equal outcome can only be attained by doing social engineering, which is what the socialists try to do, and it didn't work out for them. So I have to keep it simple.
Great. Yeah, I think that's true. Let me go to the next poster here, because I'm sort of impressed by the W there. We, the people of Group E, declare the following. Government cannot deny your right to absolve connection with the state insofar as they uphold citizens' liberty. Government will protect equality and liberty as defined above. Oh, okay. Where equality means this equal protection under the law and respect. Okay, that's not outcome equality, though. That would be the kind of equality that is a part of a system of negative liberties. And so this definition of liberty seems to include the compossibility criterion, so that's good. Although this is more American than it is French. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Universal suffrage, equality before the law, protection of property. Okay, this one's getting a little French because we're mixing in a positive right along with a system of negative rights. Again, an apples and oranges lists. Note that 4 out of these 5 bullets are negative liberties, but one of the bullets is a positive right. Here we've got 4 negative freedoms that are familiar to you from the Bill of Rights and equality under the law, but we also have no gross inequalities of income. So that means we're going to have to make a point of equalizing the income. And this might get to what was bothering you a minute ago. How are we going to accomplish the equalization of income? So here's a very famous way of getting at this problem. Let's say that we want to equalize income the way that you want to do it. So who was this group? Okay, so you're sort of scattered all over the place. Okay, so any of you who cares to articulate this, what did you have in mind by saying no gross inequalities of income? What did you have in mind for addressing that problem?
I don't know how we go about doing it. What we were saying is the question is kind of loaded. And he said, we're supposed to create equality of outcome and liberty. And he said it wasn't possible. In the next sentence, we haven't got yet. So, in order to create equality of outcome, we have to have inequalities in income and lifestyle and all that stuff. So, perfect socialism and communism.
Okay, actually there's 2 options, right? Option 1 would be to get really hardcore and make sure that everybody's got exactly equal amounts of money across the board. Total equality of money for everybody. But you could actually address this bullet point without going quite that far. You could just go with this sort of Rawlsian principle where you just equalize it a little bit. So there's still some inequalities of outcome, but they're not as drastic as they might have been a minute ago. For example, I started off this morning by unflatteringly comparing the state of my wealth to that of Bill Gates, and perhaps that's bizarre since that he's the wealthiest person in the universe. But even without making the two of us completely equal in wealth, you might say, well, look, but wouldn't it be okay if I just got, say, one of his millions? That would close the gap between us pretty considerably. He'd still be vastly more wealthy than I am, but that would make us a little bit, it would eliminate some, it would bring us a little bit closer as far as the gross inequality between Bill Gates and myself. And you could argue that this would not be a bad idea because it's, he'd hardly miss $1 million. Whereas, to me, it would make quite a substantial lifestyle improvement. I could actually fill up the gas tank on my car 3 times a week instead of twice if I had an extra $1 million. So maybe so there's 2 ways to go. One is total equality, period. The other would simply be some redistribution to equalize it out to some extent, to lower the amount of the inequalities. Okay? So some of you might have been thinking that the only way to have to sort of reconcile equality and liberty would be to go with a total equality model. But then you might have thought, well, wait a second, doesn't that mean that we have to violate people's liberties in order to equalize it out? And doesn't that interfere even with the equality of opportunity? But then you might have thought, okay, I've got a better idea. Maybe this Rawls theory works better than a socialist theory, where we don't have to completely equalize it. We'll simply bring it slightly into balance. We'll eliminate some of the levels of inequality. And that's probably the impulse that goes into some of these other sorts of things. If the minimum level of education is a positive right that is federally funded, then of course what that means is taking some money from Bill Gates to give to Joe Taxi Driver. And there was another one that had something like that. Yeah, equal access to education, same thing here. So any particular item, healthcare, education, things like that you can think of, well, we need to have that equalized. That's just another way of saying, let's take some of Bill Gates' money to give to Joe Taxi Driver. Not all of it, not 50-50 split, just some of it to bring the scales a little closer together. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's a very famous way to grapple with that problem. And this comes from the same book that the Tale of the Slave handout that you used yesterday came from, Robert Nozick's book. I'm going to update the example a little bit because he wrote that book in 1974, and so the celebrity references don't work anymore. So I'm taking his example, but I'm going to update the celebrity references. Imagine that you live in the kind of society that you were just trying to construct here, where people's resources were distributed in the way that your group thought was the best way. And if you didn't like what the majority of your group was doing, then you can sort of shift gears into your own preferred world in your head. So maybe you were hoping that it was going to be something where everybody had equal amounts of money, but the rest of your group was full of right-wing extremists who wanted there to be capitalism or something like that. So that's fine. You can go back into your own private minority world if the rest of your group was against you. Whatever it was, whether it's your own scheme or the scheme that your group adopted, okay, where you'd set it up so that there was the maximum possible amount of equality of resources, whether it was total equality or just some better redistribution of the income so that the difference between Bill Gates and Joe Taxi Driver isn't quite so shocking. So imagine that you're living in that world, okay, where the income is completely distributed in that way, that you think is the most just way. Now, here's what happens. Let's say that there's some famous, well, stipulate for the sake of argument that you like basketball, okay? Now, say that there's a famous basketball player in this world, and let's call him Michael Jordan. Even that reference is getting outdated, but you know who he is, yeah? Okay. So Michael Jordan is so amazing to watch play basketball that you just get real excited when he's going to play a game, and you want to go see those games, man, because those are way much more fun to watch than most of the regular games. In fact, you know, you'd happily sacrifice a lot to watch those games because they're that much more entertaining for you. Okay, so he recognizes this, so he sets up his contract with the team that he wants to play for with the following proviso. On your way into the arena to watch the game, all the spectators have to drop a quarter in a special box. Okay? Now, you see where I'm going with this. After a couple of million spectators during the course of the season have filed into the arena and stuck a quarter in the box, what's just happened? Well, he's got a few extra $1 million. Now, that kind of messes up the system you just set up. If you had set up an option one system where everybody had total equality of resources, now one basketball season later, this guy's got a couple of $1 million more than everybody else. But even if you had picked option two, where there was just some equality redistribution, still, this has messed everything up. Because after the end of the basketball season, he's vastly more wealthy, like Bill Gates proportions. So whatever system you had just set up has been wrecked because everybody wanted to put their quarter in the box to see Michael Jordan play. Now Michael Jordan's a zillionaire. That just wrecked your system. Question? It might, sure. I don't know whether it would or not, and I don't know whether he would judge the answer to that question to be yes or not. He might very well think the answer to that question is yes, and that might be why, for example, he gives millions of dollars every year to educational charities through his foundation. He probably does think that that's a good thing for him, right? So he does give away a lot of his money.
I was looking more at the fact that if the company has more money, then a lot of people will be more people will be, there'll be more production in general, and people will get more money, being able to raise their standard of living.
Sure, that might very well be true. No, I'm sure that's true. The question is, what would justify the forcible reallocation of those resources in a way that's different from what people would choose to do? Notice one thing about the example that I just gave. It's true that Michael Jordan has just gotten an extra several $1 million, which messes up the pattern that you had decided was the most just equal distribution of wealth a minute ago. But how did he get that extra $1 million? Because several million of you gave him a quarter. Why did you do that? Because you wanted to. At the beginning of the day, I asked you if I gave you some extra money, what would you spend it on? And you all said different things. But I imagine some other people might have answered, go watch my favorite sports hero play sports, right? That's another possible response. Some are buying shoes, some are buying books, some are buying music, others are buying tickets to see Michael Jordan play basketball. Every time you choose to spend your extra $10 on one thing, Okay? So you're, buying a CD at the record store is just like putting a quarter in the Michael Jordan box going into the arena. It's just more complicated because there's middlemen and stuff. But it's the same principle. When you indulge in your pursuits, you're giving money to that guy, but not to that guy. If you choose to buy this CD instead of that CD, you're giving money to that artist, but not giving money to that artist. If a lot of other people share your musical tastes, then that artist's going to get wealthy and that one won't be so wealthy. But no one's rights have been violated by the fact that more people share your musical tastes than like this other fellow. So the popular recording star, the popular sports heroes make a lot of money, and the less popular recording stars or the ineffective sports players don't make as much money as the product of the individual choice making of zillions of people, right? Go back to this fictional example. How does the Michael Jordan character get this extra several zillion dollars? Because zillions of people are happily sticking a quarter in his box. Okay? The moral of the story is that each of you exercising your negative liberties, your freedom to choose what to do with your own stuff, each of you individually making choices about these sorts of things, results in these inequalities of wealth. The reason why some athletes get more money than others is because more athletes are entertainers, just like rock stars or movie stars. All right? So the reason that one gets more than another is because they're more entertaining. Okay? And the reason they're super wealthy is because they can entertain zillions of people at once, like through TV and so forth. Here I am delivering what I hope is a fascinating lecture on equality and respect, but there's only 80 of you. So let's say you all gave me $100 for the privilege. So how much money would that be? Say there's 80 of you for the sake of argument. You all gave me $100. How much would that be? $8,000. Okay, but let's say that I'm a movie star, so I go make my movie, and what's it cost to get to a movie these days? If you're in Manhattan, it's 10. Let's use that because it's easier. So to go see my movie now, you have to pay $10. So to see me in the movie, you've got to pay $10. To see me at the lecture, you've got to pay $100. So how am I going to get more money, being a lecturer or being a movie star? Being a movie star, why?
Because more people are going to have access to go see you.
That's right. That's right. Hundreds of millions of people will pay $10 to see the movie. That adds up to a lot more money than the number of people that will pay $100 for the lecture. So even though each person seeing the lecture is giving me more money, way more people go to the movies than attend IHS lectures. Even if I got a dime for making the movie, if 300 million people go see the movie, I'll make more money than if I charge $1,000 for this lecture. You see how that works? So that's why movie stars and rock stars and pro athletes make $1 zillion, because everybody's putting a quarter in their Michael Jordan box. But the point is that there's nothing rights violative about that. It's the manifestation of people's individual choice making. If it's true that you have a right to yourself and that you have a right to your freedom, including a right to do what you want with your stuff, that's going to cash out as Smith getting more money than Jones. Because people will pay more money to Smith if more people like what Smith is doing than they will to Jones. And this shows up in the fact that everybody wants to do different things. Everybody wants to do different things, but for any one thing you point to, more people will like that one than the other one, and that guy's going to get more of the quarters. So the moral of the story is that you're not going to be able to do the assignment that I sent you out with. You're not going to be able to have equality of outcome, equality of distributed resources, and also have protection of individual liberty. Because any attempt to regulate or organize the outcome will violate the individual liberty that gives rise to those inequalities in the first place. if you try to say, no, no, look, this Michael Jordan thing, we don't like this because now he's got $1 million extra bucks and we were just trying to avoid that. The whole idea was to have equal shares of money. Well, so that means either you're going to have to stop people from putting a quarter in the Michael Jordan box, or stop him from signing a contract that allows him to play basketball under those conditions. In either case, what you're doing is saying, I'm not going to give you the liberty to do what you want with your quarter. So you're saying, hey, I want to spend my quarter going to the ball game. So, sorry, you can't do that, because that would mess up the pattern of income distribution. You see what happens? I can't get this equality of outcome without violating somebody's liberties. I would have to force you to stop doing what you want to do with your income, with your property, with your liberty, in order to make sure that I got this balance. And it doesn't matter whether that's 100% equality or even some sort of balancing, let's reduce the inequalities. Whatever, either way, whatever your preferred distributional scheme was that you thought was the best kind of outcome equality that was the most just, won't be compatible with people having the freedom to choose what they do with their property, with their freedom. You had a question?
I think that the Chamberlain, the Jordan example provided by Nozick is quite simplistic, because it doesn't take into account the ends-based approach that he follows, and that means that it doesn't take into account the existing inequalities that happen to occur due to the acquisition and the inherence of acquisition in a certain society. And that's a very problematic fact about the argument. And it also says nothing about things that Rawls tries to explain through the vial of ignorance. So like the existence of other factors which do not have to do anything with entertainment, but have to do with the with social phenomena that existed, such as discrimination and socioeconomic inequalities that create less opportunities. And the third counter-argument to the Jordan argument is that there is a Kantian way of looking at how wealth is going to be used, or anything is going to be used. There is a means or an ends approach. So you can use a knife either to cut or to butter your bread, but Nozick's argument, I think, fails to take into account this Kantian approach.
I'm not sure how it fails to take that into account. It seems to me that what he's doing is universalizing the principle of respect for people's choice-making subject to the compossibility criterion. Right? Obviously, Nozick would disapprove of using your knife to stab somebody because that violates compossibility. But if I choose to use the knife for my own meal, as opposed to giving it to you, that's my choice, and it shows respect for my autonomy, even in a Kantian sense, to allow me the freedom to do whatever I want with it, as long as it's subject to the compossibility criterion. As to your other objection, it's certainly true that through other kinds of violations of people's rights, we could arrive at an unjust state of affairs. But that doesn't mean that going into the future, right, starting from here and looking forwards, that the argument fails. It's still true that the inequality of Smith and Jones is the result of people choosing to give Smith their money instead of giving Jones their money. That's why, for example, Bill Gates has $1 zillion because people keep buying Microsoft stuff. And don't start telling me that you don't have any choice, that all the computers have Microsoft. That's not true at all. There's other operating systems. There's other computers that don't work that way at all. If you really didn't want to use a Microsoft-based system, you wouldn't have to do it. But lots of people do it. Why is that? Bill Gates come around threatening you? Did he bring some bully boys around and threaten to beat you up if you don't buy a Microsoft-based computer? There's actually a funny Saturday Night Live sketch on that premise. But in reality, that's not what happened, right? People just, here's the computer. You want to buy this or don't you? So a lot of people buy it. Next thing you know, he's a zillionaire. Okay? And Bill Gates, in reality, is just like Michael Jordan in the example. He started off, he's not some world-conquering thief menace. He's just some computer geek, college dropout, whatever, and he created something that people seem to keep buying. Next thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. And that's strictly the outcome of people's choice-making about the disposition of their resources. Another way to spin the moral of the story here is that there really isn't any difference. You often hear people make a distinction between economic freedom and civil liberties or something like that. But actually what this example demonstrates, I think, is that there really isn't any difference between personal freedom and economic freedom. They're the same thing. Economic freedom is simply the physical manifestation of your personal freedom, your choice-making, your autonomy as a thinking, choosing person. That manifests itself in the fact that you want to do different things. Right? I asked before, what are you going to spend your money on? What are you going to spend your money on? What do you like? What do you like? What do you like? And you all had slightly different answers. You liked some of the same things, but you liked different other sorts of things. Okay? Right? In some, we have a lot of overlap in our tastes and pursuits. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But we also have a lot of divergence in our tastes and pursuits. And the physical manifestation of the differences in your personality, your likes, your dislikes, your values, that's physically manifested in the transactions that you undertake. Right? You want these shoes, so you go and buy those shoes. You like that book, so you buy that book. You like that movie, so you go see that movie. Okay? So your economic liberty is simply the physical manifestation, as you interact with other people, of your personal freedom. And there isn't any difference. It's not like, well, there's these kinds of freedoms, and we'll be serious about those, but then there's these other kinds of freedoms, and we're not going to take that real seriously. That's not going to work. Again, it won't logically work at all, because you can't erode these kinds of freedoms without undermining these kinds of freedoms. They're all the same thing. Yeah?
Bill Gates stole DOS, or bought DOS from Xerox.
Stole or bought?
Bought DOS from Xerox and
Thank you.
licensed it to IBM. Bill Gates acquired or imitated Apple's graphical user interface. So if he just cleverly manipulated the system, shouldn't we have a way to prevent people from getting ridiculously rich off just kind of weaseling their way in and out of our cracks in society?
He's a clever guy, no doubt. He was especially shrewd in his deciding to license the software as opposed to the machines itself. He really got the last laugh on IBM that way. As far as him borrowing the graphical user interface design from Apple, they, of course, stole it from Xerox. So there's obviously a lot of idea sharing and idea swapping, and perhaps even what we might loosely call idea stealing in these kinds of technological communities, right? But it wasn't like he went over to Steve Jobs' house and knocked him in the head and took some stuff, right? We've got different people working on different kinds of projects. Sometimes they share ideas. Sometimes one person says, oh, that's pretty cool. I could use that myself. And in fact, it took him several years to get with the program as far as graphical user interfaces, didn't it? But Apple themselves, they didn't make that up. They stole that from Xerox. Bill Gates perhaps is more of a shrewd wheeler-dealer than he is a computer geek. But, well, again, what do you mean by rewarding? I didn't give Bill Gates $1 billion. Did any of you give Bill Gates $1 billion? No. I just bought a computer. Okay? Why did I buy a Microsoft-based computer instead of an Apple? Because Apple's cost like 4 or 5 times as much as the IBM clones. So I bought a Microsoft-based computer because it was cheaper for me. I have other good reasons to want to buy Microsoft computers. Namely, that's what everyone else at my college uses. And that's what like 85 to 95% of every other academic I know uses. So for me to get online and collaborate on book projects with scholars all over the world, one thing that makes that easier is that we're all using the same stuff. Okay? So there's a lot of benefits to me to use those kinds of computers. So when you say we reward him, well, I didn't make him a billionaire. I just bought a computer because it would work for me to use it. But if a zillion other people do that, that's what makes him a billionaire. So there's no collective decision, let's award Bill Gates the Billionaire of the Year award and give him $1 billion. It's just a zillion people saying, yeah, I'll have one of those computers. It's just like a quarter in the Michael Jordan box. There's no one person who pays $40 million to go to a ball game. But 40 million people might pay $1 to go to the ball game. But that adds up to $40 million. We've got time for one or two more, yeah? I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm not entirely comfortable with the language of maximizing utility, but it's true that I will buy products that I think will benefit me in some way. But if a lot of people buy the same products, then the provider of that product gets super wealthy. We're sort of verging into economics territory here, so maybe this is a good time for me to stop. But not because I don't know anything about economics, but because we have better people better qualified than I to talk about economics. There's that inequality again, right? We're not all equal. I don't know as much about economics as Frank and Howie do. But what I am fairly confident about is the idea that we're not going to be able to take equality seriously if we violate people's rights. But that means that we can't have outcome equality and also equal respect for rights. Pretty confident about that one. Okay, I think it's break time.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.